They will tell you the 1950s American housewife was a magazine photograph. A pearl necklace, a casserole, a station wagon. I have a notebook in my study that disagrees. 62 years of disagreement. Written every Friday by a Polish steelworker's wife on a hill above the Monongahela, in a row house she paid off in 10 years on 1 mil paycheck and 8 mouths to feed. Her name was Halina Kowalska. She came off the boat in 1923, raised 8 children in a row house on Polish Hill, a few streets up from St. Stanislaus. Her husband, Stanislav, worked the open hearth at Jones and Loughlin until his lungs gave out in 1956. By then the house was theirs, free and clear, paid off in 10 years on a mill wage. She did it with a system I'm going to lay out for you, rule by rule, every one of them. 30 rules. Halina called it the Friday Book. I'm going to read you what she wrote on the page where she balanced the last mortgage payment in 1933. I will get to that page, I promise. But first, I need you to understand the house I'm about to take you into. Stay with me for the next 20 minutes. I do not ask you to click anything. I ask you to sit with me the way I used to sit with these women, in their kitchens, with the kettle going. And in the comments when you are done, tell me, whose grandmother kept a notebook like Halina's? Tell me her name and her street. I read every one. The first time I saw the 6 envelopes, I was 28 years old. I had a nursing degree and a clipboard, and I thought I had walked into the house of a woman who did not understand banking. Halina was 81. She sat me at her kitchen table, opened a tin bread box on the counter, and took out 6 small canvas envelopes, one at a time, like cards. Each had a word on it, in pencil, in Polish. Czynsz, kościół, pogrzeb, buty, wesele, ten zły tydzień. The rent, the church, the funeral, the shoes, the wedding, the bad week. They were not tricks. They were the whole frame of a woman's week for 62 years in a kitchen that smelled of cabbage and coal smoke and Friday bread. That is rule 1. 6 envelopes. Every dollar the household earned passed through one of those 6 before it could be spent. A single pile, she told me once, is a pile a man can reach into without knowing what he's taking. 6 envelopes is a household with a conscience. Rule 2 is the Friday account. Every Friday afternoon, after Stanislav came home with his pay, Halina opened the bread box, took out the envelopes, and recounted. Every penny. She wrote the totals in the notebook in pencil. Stanislav did not touch the envelopes. He had his own discipline at the mill. The household discipline was hers. The Friday account took her 40 minutes. The children knew to stay quiet during the Friday count, the way other children knew to stay quiet at grace. It was the most settled hour of the week. Rule 3 is the rent envelope first. The rent, or in the early years the mortgage payment, came out of the Friday pay before anything else. The mortgage was the wall. You did not eat into the wall. Halina paid off the row house in 1933, 10 years after they bought it, on a mill wage in the worst year of the Depression. I went and pulled the deed transfer myself one afternoon in 1985. No, I was 57, so it must have been 1986. And the bank's stamp is there. Paid in full, August 14th, 1933. Rule 4 is the church envelope, paid second. 5% of the Friday pay. Not because the church demanded it, because the parish was the only institution on Polish Hill that would bury you if you could not pay your own funeral, and you do not take from a parish you have not fed. Rule 5 is the funeral envelope. Coins every Friday for 62 years. You do not die owing the parish. You do not die leaving your widow to beg. When Stanislav died in 1956, the funeral envelope paid for the casket, the priest, the flowers, and the meal in the parish hall. She owed nobody. That was the point. Rule 6 is the shoe envelope. 1 pair of new shoes per child every September before school. Saved for from January onward. School shoes were oversized by half a size and stuffed with newspaper, so a child grew into them across 2 winters. Halina would not send a child to St. Stanislaus in shoes that did not fit. A child who is sent to school in cardboard learns to expect cardboard. Rule 7 is the bad week envelope, the buffer. $2 went in every Friday no matter what, even in 1932, when the mill cut pay by 1/3. The bad week envelope was the only envelope that could be opened in an emergency, and the rule was simpler than any of the others. If you opened it, you replaced what you took, $2 a week, until the envelope was whole again. There was no such thing as a permanent withdrawal. That is the envelope system. 7 rules in 1 bread box. I dismissed it for 6 years. I told a colleague over lunch in 1976 that the Polish Hill envelope women had a charming little system. Charming. I used that word. Halina had paid off a mortgage in the middle of the Depression on a mill wage, and I called it charming. Now you need the institutional shape of her week, because the envelopes were only half. The mill was a presence in her week, the way a river is a presence in a town. You do not see it from your kitchen, but everything you do is shaped by where it runs. Stanisław was not careless with his lungs. Stanisław was a man given one option: feed 8 children or quit, and the mill knew this and priced his lungs accordingly. The whole hill knew the price. The widows on Polish Hill kept a separate ledger for that price. Rule 8 is the pantry as a second paycheck. Halina kept 3 months of food at all times, not because she was hoarding, but because the mill could cut a shift on a Tuesday with no warning. She put up cabbage in autumn, sauerkraut in a stoneware crock in the cellar, £100 most years. She put up plums, apples. The cellar had shelves of jars August through April. The pantry was a parallel pension. You did not draw it below half. Rule 9 is the 3 market route. Halina walked to 3 different butchers and grocers every Tuesday, in order, because each one marked down different cuts on different days. She walked the route in the same order for 40 years. It saved her, by her own accounting in the back of the notebook, about $11 a month in the 1950s, on a mill wage of $48 a week. Real money. Sigrid Lindgren, a Swedish carpenter's wife in Lawrenceville, kept the same kind of route in her own almanac for 66 years. The 2 women never met. They had the same week. Rule 10 is the 1 chicken, 4 meals rule. A whole chicken on Sunday, roasted for Sunday dinner. Tuesday, the bones made a soup. Thursday, the broth made a kasha. Saturday, the last of the broth thinned a cabbage stew. Halina wrote each meal's per-person cost in the margin. The total never went above 6 cents a person across the week. The recipe was the budget. Rule 11 is the grow it rule. Halina had a backyard, 10 feet by 20 feet, between the row house and the alley. She grew tomatoes, peppers, onions, beans, and an enormous patch of cabbage every year from 1925 forward. The garden produced about 40% of the household's vegetables from May to October. She kept a small ledger of what she would have paid at the market for what she grew. Rule 12 is the Sunday loaf. Helena baked 2 loaves of bread every Saturday for 62 years. One for the family table, the other was for a neighbour whose week had been hard, a husband who lost a shift, a child who took sick. The Sunday loaf was not charity, it was insurance, because next month it might be your husband who lost the shift, and next month a loaf would come up your steps. Polish Hill ran on loaves. Rule 13 is the mend before buy rule. Every garment was mended before it was replaced. Helena darned socks on a wooden mushroom in the evenings. She turned shirt collars when they frayed, sewing the worn side inward. She let down hems on the daughters' dresses 3 times before a dress was cut down for the next sister. A coat that came into that house in 1928 came out as a child's lining in 1940. Rule 14 is the no store-bought rule for what could be made. Soap was made twice a year, in spring and again in fall, from lye and rendered fat in a cast-iron pot in the backyard. You knew it was October when you smelled it on the hill. She made noodles by hand on Sunday afternoons, rolled out on a floured cloth. The store-bought version cost 3 times the made version. Rule 15 is the Friday bread rule. The week's bread was baked Friday morning before Stanislav came home with the pay. 4 loaves. Bread that was a day old was sliced thin for breakfast, 3 days old, toasted. 5 days old, went into the soup. Nothing in that kitchen was thrown away. Now we come to the page I promised. I'm going to turn to it. I have read this page maybe 100 times. It is page 41, dated August 14th, 1933, and at the top Helena wrote in Polish a single line. Dom jest nasz. The house is ours. Below it she balanced the last mortgage payment, $6.22. Below the balance she wrote down the rules she had used. She knew at the moment of paying it off that she had built a system, and she wrote it down so her daughters would have it. Rule 16 is the second paycheck she made rule. Helena took in piecework sewing from a downtown garment shop from 1926 onward. Buttons, hems, collars set. She earned about $7 a week at it. Every $1 of that 7 went into a 7th envelope kept under the linen in the dresser. The mortgage payment on the row house was $19 a month. 6 of those $19 every month for 10 years came from buttons sewn by lamplight after the children were asleep. The bank did not know it. Helena paid off the mortgage with her hands. Rule 17 is the border rule. From 1928 to 1933, the family took in 1 boarder, a young Polish steelworker, unmarried, who slept on a cot in the parlour and ate 2 meals a day at the kitchen table. $5 a week. $5 times 52 weeks times 5 years is $1,300. That was 1/3 of the original mortgage. Mary O'Connor's mother in Lawrenceville ran a boarders' table for 40 years. Irish parish, Polish parish, same arithmetic. Rule 18 is the dowry from birth rule. Each daughter's wedding fund was opened the year she was born, a quarter a week into a small tin. 25 cents times 52 weeks times 18 years is $234 by the wedding morning. Helena had 4 daughters. 4 tins paid out at 4 weddings between 1945 and 1958. not one of them on credit. Rule 19 is the remittance rule. $2 a month went back to Helena's sister Anna in a village outside Krakow for 30 years, through the Depression, through the war, when no letter came back for 4 years, and Helena sent the money anyway. That envelope was sacred. When Stanisław's pay was cut in 1932, Helena cut the church envelope by half. She did not cut the remittance. Rule 20 is the widow pool rule. After Stanisław died in 1956, Helena joined the Polish Hill Widows' Circle. 11 women in the first year, never fewer than 6 in the years that followed. They pooled small amounts every week and paid the funeral expenses of any widow on the hill whose own funeral envelope had run dry. Helena was the bookkeeper. There is a phrase for what those women built. The economists call it female mutual aid. The women called it the parish. They built a private welfare state out of small contributions in a neighbourhood the rest of the country was about to forget. Rule 21 is the mass card rule. For every neighbourhood widow whose husband died, Helena paid the small parish fee for a memorial mass on the anniversary. 25 cents in 1956, $1 by the 70s, 41 names by the end, including her own Stanisław's, paid for by herself every year. Sigrid Lindgren did the same in Lawrenceville for the Swedish Lutheran congregation across the river. Different church, same calendar of remembrance. Rule 22 is the no credit rule. Helena did not buy on time. Not the icebox in 1929, not the gas stove in 1938, not the small radio in 1946. Each one was saved for and bought outright. She had watched a woman 2 doors down lose a stove because she missed 3 payments. The stove had been removed by 2 men in a truck on a Tuesday morning. Helena was 26 and pregnant with her second child, and she stood on her stoop and watched the stove leave. She did not buy on time after that. Ever. Rule 23 is the cash-only weekend rule. Saturday and Sunday, no money left the house. If you had not bought it by Friday evening, you did not need it. The woman who can spend on Saturday, Helena said, is the woman the merchants have built the week around. Now we come to the rules of raising children inside the system. Because the system did not only pay off a house, it taught a generation what money was for. Rule 24 is the chore as share rule. Every child in the Kowalski house earned a share of the household by age 6. Not pocket money, share. The eldest carried coal up from the cellar. The next swept the parlour. The next set the table. Helena kept a small chart in the kitchen, marks for chores, marks turned to pennies at the week's end, pennies into the child's own small tin on a shelf in the bedroom. The chart was not about labour. The chart was about teaching a child that money came from work and that work was traceable. Rule 25 is the no toy without a saving rule. The children did not receive bought toys at random. A toy was an event. A child wanted a doll. The child saved for half across 6 months. Helena paid the other half on a birthday. The doll was twice as valued for it. Rule 26 is the parish school rule. Helena sent every child to St. Stanislaus Parish School, where the tuition was a quiet weekly contribution from the family rather than a fixed bill. It was about half of what the public school cost in lost lunches and uniforms. The parish school fed the children at lunch and produced 6 adults who all worked steady jobs into retirement. Rule 27 is the visit not vacation rule. The family never took a paid vacation in 62 years. They went to see Helena's cousins in Buffalo by train once every 3 years, and the cousins came to Pittsburgh once every 3 years. Hotels were not in the household vocabulary. A bed in a cousin's spare room was. Rule 28 is the dowry of skills rule. Each daughter, by the time she was 18, knew how to bake bread, mend a coat, sew a buttonhole, put up cabbage, balance a household ledger, and run an envelope system. The dowry was not only the tin under the linen. The dowry was the daughter herself, fully equipped to run her own household. 3 of Helena's 4 daughters ran envelope systems of their own into the 70s. Rule 29 is the funeral as the final account rule. Helena believed that the funeral envelope was not for the dead. It was for the living. To die owing nothing, to be buried by your own people, paid for by your own savings, was the final act of a household economy that had taken 60 years to build. She made sure her funeral envelope was full when she died in 1987. Her daughter-in-law told me Helena had $340 in that envelope on the morning she died. The casket cost $280. The remainder paid the parish for the mass. Rule 30 is the rule under all the other rules. The first 29 were the architecture. The 30th was the foundation. I asked her, finally, on a Tuesday afternoon in 1984, after 8 years of visiting, what the secret was. She looked at me over her teacup. She was 81. She said, "Never spend $1 that has not been thought about by the woman who earned it." That was the rule. Every dollar in that house had been thought about, by her, before it left. That is why the house was paid off in 10 years. That is why 8 children ate. If you have a grandmother whose pantry was always full, and you never asked why, this is why. If you have a great aunt who darned her socks into her 90s and you thought it was eccentric, it was not. If you have a notebook in a drawer in your mother's house that you cannot read because it is in Polish or Italian or Slovak or Hungarian or Croatian or Ukrainian or Yiddish, do not throw it away. Take it to a priest, a translator, a neighbor who still has the language. The woman who wrote it built something. She built it without a bank, without a benefits department, without a college, without a credit card, without the country noticing she was building it at all. Then she handed the notebook to me in 1991 with one instruction. Read it. Then tell. I have been telling for 34 years. The notebook is on the second shelf of my study, 3 books in from the left. Sigrid's almanac is 2 shelves above. The shelf was built by Thomas in 91. He read it before I did. They are gone now. What they knew is yours.